Hello, Charles County. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Cracking the Code, a chance for us to talk about all things related to zoning, codes, and regulations here in Charles County. I'm Doria Fleisher with Media Services, and joining us as always is the wonderful Liz Theobalds from the County Attorney's Office. Thanks for being here, Liz.
And thanks again for having me.
We're also joined by a very special guest, Kelly Palmer, our Senior Planner in the Department of Planning and Growth Management.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well, thanks, Kelly. Thanks for coming.
Sure, thanks for inviting me.
You actually kind of volunteered yourself for this, which is a big deal. Sometimes we have to kind of stalk people and beg them to do this, but you had an exciting topic, so we're thrilled you're here.
Yeah, thank you.
We're going to talk about all things animals. But before we do that, Kelly, tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been with Charles County government, and what is a senior planner?
Sure. So I've been with Charles County almost 7 years. It'll be 7 years in September.
Happy early anniversary.
Thank you. A senior planner is our highest level of planner in the planning department. It's someone who's been experienced in the field for usually more than 5 years. So I've been with Charles County almost 7, but prior to that, I was with St. Mary's County doing environmental planning for 11 and a half years.
Awesome. It's a good resume. Thanks for bringing that experience over to us. So today specifically, we're going to talk about animals and farm animals and what people can have and what they can't have and how they know what they can have and how many, kind of like old MacDonald has a farm, but let's get into the logistics, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So Kelly, when we talk about farm animals specifically to today and your job, what kind of animals are we talking about?
So there's definitely a variety, but usually the common ones are going to be chickens, rabbits, horses, cows, sheep, goats, and pigs.
It does. I mean, this is definitely getting an old McDonald's feel to it.
Definitely is.
And am I correct? Just, I'm asking this just out of curiosity. Chickens have become a thing, right? That got real popular during the pandemic, more and more people.
Definitely, yes.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know Charles County is holding on to those rural roots and wants to have these nice, whether it's a big operation or a smaller operation, people want animals. And Liz, you're here as a part of this conversation because way back when the code was written, animals were a thing.
Animals were a thing.
So how did this become a part of the code? Why is this a thing that county governments have written into their codes?
Well, as any county evolves and develops, it started out probably as a rural area. And as the suburbs expand, you start seeing that it starts encroaching into where it is that other agricultural uses would be, such as having horses and chickens and rabbits and things like that. So that's why, like I said, it's a matter of making sure it is that you have those consistent uses, and you don't have somebody encroaching on with a whole lot of pigs and chickens right next to somebody's nice little subdivision.
Gotcha. So just another way that Charles County wants to protect all of its residents and make this a livable place for all of us.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, so magic question number one, Kelly, this is a really basic one. Are Charles County residents allowed to have farm animals as pets?
So to have a farm animal as a pet, your property land area must be a minimum of 1 acre or for small animals and 2 acres for large animals. So animals must be kept in a humane, secure, and sanitary fashion to not create a deterrent or nuisance.
Okay, so the answer is yes and, right? You can have it if you have the property to have it, and you have to do certain things to have it. It's not just a blanket yes, and it's not just a blanket no.
Correct.
We were laughing before we started recording, or maybe I was laughing and you guys were shaking your head that I was bringing it up again. This is one of the reasons that I think government is so complicated, is that we have so few black and white answers. There's a lot of yes and, or this, but what about that?
And it depends.
And it depends. And that can be so complicated for our residents. So hopefully we can break it down a little bit with some of the information you just gave.
Sure.
Okay, so when people think about okay, I met those requirements, how do I know how many I can have or what I can have? What are kind of the things they should think about before they go out and create their own farm?
Sure. So if you have small animals such as chickens and rabbits on your property, and it's less than 2 acres, you're allowed 2 adult small animals. Okay. So that is your cap. You can have 2. So 2 adult chickens or 2 rabbits, and that's kind of where it ends. If you have small animals in your properties between 2 and 5 acres, you're allowed 4 adult small animals per acre. So you can have a little bit more. Large animals such as horses, cattle, pigs, goats, and sheep are permitted in residential zones, but the property must be at least 2 acres or more in size with a minimum of 1 acre per adult animal. And then farm animals on properties greater than 5 acres are permitted in certain zones without a quantity limitation.
So you just even added in a whole additional component, which is that idea of a residential zone. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to go too off track, but Liz, I'm going to look to you. We've talked about this in other episodes, but when Kelly uses that word residential zone, What does that mean?
It means that it's predominantly used for residences where you might have residential subdivisions. However, when we have several of our zones, it can allow for the overlap. As you recall, we're interested in maintaining a rural feature to the county. So therefore, you have to have, just as Kelly went ahead and said, you have to have the adequate acreage. You have to have enough spacing between neighbors and things like that. Some of those larger lot places may, in fact, be residential or be zoned for residential, but also have some farming component.
So there's that idea that step number one is you really have to know kind of where you live. And this isn't, I own a small business and this is my horse that lives outside. And this isn't, I live in this, we're going to talk about HOAs in a minute, but this is very specific to these residential zones. So we want our viewers, listeners to also know where they live. Yeah?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. So horses, let's touch on them. And horses are something that are near and dear to my heart. And I know I'm not the only one in the county. Charles County has a lot of people and a deep, rich history of people owning horses and taking care of horses for everything from fun to competition to using them for field work. So tell us about the difference between horse owners like residentially, just having them for fun, versus something more commercial.
Sure. So a commercial stable is any stable for the housing of horses or other equine operated in a commercial capacity. So this would include stabling, riding lessons, and other commercial activities not related to the ordinary operation of a farm with a capacity for more than 4 equine.
And when I hear that word commercial, tell me if I'm saying this correctly. When I hear commercial, I'm making money.
Correct.
It's a business. So this is the difference of like, these are my horses, they live at my house, versus these are my horses, this is my business. People are coming in and out of that business. Am I saying that correctly?
Correct.
Okay. And then horse owners in general?
So a horse owner is anyone who owns one or more horses for their private use on private property. So in order to own horses in Charles County, like we said, you have to have at least 2 acres, and we require that you have at least 1 acre per horse. For example, if you have 2 acres, you can have 2 horses.
Beautiful. Okay, so we've split up the difference between like what zone you live in. We've talked about the difference between making money versus just pet ownership for fun. Regardless of all of those things, though, we're going to talk about like how you take care of them, because part of what Liz always talks about is that these codes and regulations are put into place so that I want to live in Charles County and I don't hate my neighbors for ruining where I live. Yeah?
That's correct.
So talk to us about like the shelter, the food, the waste, the manure, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
What requirements does your office oversee for that?
Sure. So from a zoning standpoint, stables, feeding, or bedding areas for 2 or more horses should be located at least 75 feet from any public road or lot line. And pastures, if they're fenced, can extend all the way to the lot line. So they can go all the way up to the property boundary. On parcels that are greater than 5 acres in size, any and all areas of animal confinement that are less than 1 acre in size, the area for your manure storage, so for your waste, or feed storage, shall be a minimum distance of 75 feet from any public right-of-way, and in no case closer than 250 feet from any existing residential dwellings on any adjoining parcel. For chicken coops and other accessory structures associated with the housing of small livestock, they can be 6 feet from the side and rear property line. And property owners should also be advised that a nutrient management plan may be required for horses, and they can contact the Soil Conservation District for more information and assistance with preparing those documents.
It's a lot of rules.
It really is.
But it's also a lot of rules with like really clear guidelines, yes? So
Yes.
like this is where you get out the tape measure and you say, this is where my neighbor is, or this is where the road is, or this is where the property line is, and make sure you meet it.
Correct.
And I think one of the things I feel like Liz and I have heard throughout doing these Cracking the Code episodes is that it's so important to know like whether these rules make sense to you or don't make sense, whether they feel excellent or whether they feel silly. The important thing is to know about them before you do anything. So don't start building your deck till you know what the code says. Don't start planning your small business till you know what the code says. And in this case, it sounds like don't go get the animals.
Right.
And even if you have the animals, don't start setting up, like spending money and time and energy setting up stuff, because potentially you would have to move it. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. So another one, like know this before you do it.
Yes.
Okay. So HOAs are a topic that we talk about a lot, and I know it's something that people think about a lot. How does this work? Like you are a Charles County resident, but you're also a part of an HOA. Where is the difference between rules for the HOA versus rules for Charles County? How do the two overlap?
Sure. So we always say if you live in a neighborhood with an HOA, you should definitely check with them first before you come to the county to get any zoning approvals or even ask us questions. Neighborhoods with an HOA may be subject to more stringent requirements or prohibitions, and it's important to not only know the requirements set forth by the county, but also to consult your HOA for approval first.
So Charles County has the rules.
Yes.
Your HOA also has rules. You have to follow your HOA rules before you even, so even if Charles County says you can have this many chickens because you have this much property, if your HOA says no, Charles County's rule doesn't matter. Is that a fair way to say that? That the HOA supersedes Charles County's zone. Is that an
That's
accurate
correct.
statement?
And
Okay.
I think it gets back to another thing that we've spoken about over the last several episodes is involvement of the neighbors. If you are involved in a place that has an HOA, more likely than not, it's residential at some component. And if the other residents don't like to hear roosters, or you go ahead and say, well, it's just a bigger bird, maybe it's a peacock. People don't necessarily want to hear that. And then they'll file complaints. Complaints happen. First, they have to start with the HOA. The HOA will sometimes reach out to the zoning and say, what can we do? And that gets to a whole mess that you really don't need to have. So you do need to start with the HOA. Get the approval from the HOA before you go ahead and start buying horses, buying chickens, buying rabbits, and things like that.
That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying. Okay, so we've talked about the difference between commercial and just like, these are my pets. What about the difference between farm animals that are being raised with the intent to sell them? So these are things that I am taking and I know I'm going to then sell them to somebody else.
Sure. So the regulations are different. For example, farm animals raised for sale on less than or equal to 5 acres is permitted only by a special exception from the county's Board of Appeals in the AC, the RR, and the WCD zones, which are our big rural zones.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you for just a sec. Do those acronyms for us. So
Okay.
AC, RR, and WCD are.
Sure. Agricultural conservation, rural residential, and watershed conservation districts.
So I have to know where I live because the rules would look different.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
And so the minimum standards for land area set by the United States Department of Agriculture in Article 4 of the zoning ordinance must also be met.
So we go even like now it goes from the county level up a little bit higher.
Right.
Okay. And if you didn't know if you lived in one of those zones, this would be a great time to go onto the Planning and Growth Management website and look for that GIS map where you type in your address and the zone overlay. Am I saying that
Yes.
correctly?
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly.
That map is so much fun to play with. And special shout out to Glenn Gorman on your team who
Yes.
works on that. When I have a question, it is so cool to be able to put in an address and see exactly what I'm looking at. So viewers and listeners, if you haven't done that yet, take a minute to go and we'll put that link in the show notes. But check out your property and see what it includes and what it doesn't. It's a great way to really know where you live in Charles County. Kelly and Liz, talk to us about like what we've missed. I feel like we gave a lot of like details. What are the other important things that people should know about this topic? What do you wish people would know when you get the phone calls and the complaints and the concerns and the my neighbor did this and what do I do?
So we always recommend that people reach out to us first. If you're
Okay.
considering adding anything to your property, whether it be farm animals or a deck or a shed or a pool, reach out to the county first. We have a wonderful form on our webpage that you can go and fill out. It's an appointment request form.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a meeting with us, but it gets the information into us and one of our planners can respond. They can give you information as far as zoning and the regulations that apply to whatever your question is. If you're interested in getting farm animals, you can put that in there and we can allow you, or we can let you know how many are allowed on your property. We can also give you links to the different sections of the ordinance that are pertinent, as well as put you in touch with our animal control staff over there so they can help you with any questions regarding the housing and care of your animals.
That's beautiful. So just a good place to start of like reach out and one of these subject matter experts will get back in touch with you.
Right.
And Liz, you wear kind of all the different shoes in the county attorney's office because you are an advisor to all of our departments from the planning and growth management, which is Kelly, but also Kelly just mentioned animal control, which falls under our emergency services.
Absolutely.
Where's the overlay with animals with these two departments?
So even though you may get approval to go ahead and have certain animals in certain places, do understand that the regulations, it's Chapter 230 in our Charles County Code, does apply to the care and shelter of any animals it is you have. It's not unusual, and I think we just talked about complaints and things like that. If a neighbor sees that you have too many chickens, or if the chickens don't look like they're well cared for, or if you have a horse and the horse doesn't look like it's well cared for, they may just call animal control just to say, hey, this person has this. They may be allowed to have it, but it doesn't look like there's appropriate care. They have to have certain shelter. They have to have proper ventilation. That you need to make sure it is that the places are maintained in a sanitary manner. So those are all things that I would say that also fit right in line with what you need to consider if you want to have any kind of farm animals. as
So
pets.
both of the, like when you think about the codes that are written for the care and maintaining of their safety, but also the property, they kind of go parallel to each other, that
They're
your
hand in
office,
hand.
Kelly, is dealing with, how do we make sure that the property is equipped, and then the animal control side is how do we make sure they're cared for?
Yes.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's a lot for people to know. Having animals is a big responsibility,
It's huge.
but it also sounds like this information is there. So as long as people prepare themselves beforehand and kind of know the rules and know what to do and what not to do, and they've got plenty of people to reach out to if they're not sure. Awesome.
Correct.
Okay, so Kelly, people want to learn more about this. Where do they go? What do they do?
So for any other information or any questions you have, we have, like again, I said, our website. We have a link on there. You can do an appointment request. It's called a PGM appointment request. Put all your information in there, phone, email, best way to contact you. If you'd like a meeting, include that in there and we can get back to you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'll make sure that's all in the show notes. Liz, what do you want people to know?
I think we've just about covered it. I think the way it is you summed it up was absolutely the best. We have zoning, which says, yes, you can have it under certain circumstances, maybe, and definitely check with them first.
I love that this is such a county attorney, like maybe, definitely, check, like.
And it all
I love
amounts
those
to,
lawyer
it
answers.
depends.
It depends.
But I think the other overarching thing is that, yes, it is, just as you said, having animals, it's a huge responsibility, and particularly and farm animals. I mean, they're not small investments, and they do bring people a lot of comfort and enjoyment. So just as you pointed out, you've got the other regulations to make sure it is that they're properly cared for, and I think that's the biggest takeaway that I could offer.
Beautiful. I so appreciate, I learn something every time we sit down for interviews like this. So thank you. It's been a big amount of information to take in, but I think all of this helps us just understand a little bit better the whys, and that none of these are done to be difficult and micromanaging, but this is done to protect every level of life in Charles County, from the person who owns the animals to the neighbor who has to live next door to the animals,
Potentially
to the
downwind.
animals,
Yeah.
to downwind. Is that what you said? Yeah. So let's make sure all of our upwind and downwind neighbors are all having a pleasant experience living here in Charles County. Thank you so much for being here, Kelly Palmer, our senior planner. Thank you for all of this information about animal things. And Liz Theobalds from our county attorney's office, thanks for making sure we follow the rules and do it carefully. I appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you found this episode interesting. Of course, you can go back and see previous episodes, and there'll be more content coming your way and cracking the code. Thanks so much, Charles County. Take care, stay safe, and stay engaged.
Thanks for listening. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, search Charles County Government on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And be sure to like and subscribe. We're also available on YouTube. Search Charles County Commissioners. And stay connected for all county news, information, and programs by visiting www.charlescountymd.gov/stay connected.